Okay, 3, 2, 1. There are certain rules you have to follow when watching First Days with Moire. First off, do not expect us to actually upload on the first day. Second off, do not expect us to upload on time. And thirdly, expect Ian to go on long, annoying, rampant tangents about why a film shouldn't have a particular plot hole that doesn't matter for the rest of the story. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome to the 80th episode of First Days with Moire, or Wayne Chun with Moire, as I'm just reading the thumbnail now. Howdy, I'm your host, Ian Taylor. This is the Anthology Pathology episode. Joining me tonight is the wonderful musician, artist, and so forth, Devin King. And we have a special guest with us tonight. Who is this weird son of a bitch? Introduce yourself. Hey!
It's me!
It's the guy.
Chad!
Me, a Mario, played by Chris Pratt. That's
I
my
was the
impression of
turkey
Mario.
all along!
No, Chris Pratt as Mario will be, hey, I'm Mario. There's
You
not
know
gonna
what's
be an
funny?
accent.
I was actually just having a conversation with my friend about this. Like, do you think Chris Pratt will just phone it in and do his voice?
Oh,
Or
he
do you
already
think, like,
confirmed he's not
'cause,
doing
like,
an accent. He already confirmed
really?
that. Yep.
But, like, the Mario accent is, like, the most easy, like, cliche
Me,
accent.
Mario.
Yeah, it's so
It's
iconic.
me, Mario.
Even like Chris Martinet admitted in an interview that like he made it up on the spot, so he just went for some stereotypical like, I'm gonna go get some sausage, I'm gonna go get some spaghetti, and we can have a pizza party, and that was
That's
good
so nice,
enough to
Santa Paula.
apparently good enough to get the part of Mario, and he first
It's a
yeah.
phoned-in American accent imitating an Italian man as created by a Japanese video game company.
But I
So
wouldn't want it any other way, you mad
it's a true
legend.
culture clash of media.
Yeah, it's one layer too many, but wouldn't want any other way, Charles. Thank you for making up that accent on the spot. Anyways, this is the Anthology episode, which I don't know about you guys, I'm very excited for this episode. Not so much for the Animatrix, but Trick or Treat and Buster Scruggs are some of my personal favorite anthology films, and I'm very excited, curious, nervous, and terrified to see what you guys think of that.
You had to bury the lead there, didn't you? But no, I'm super excited for all these. And if you think that, us being able to very incomprehensibly recall regular movies is bad, wait till you hear us talk about this, because these are just even more multi-fractured, stories within stories. So luckily Tad wrote out a list of the titles of all the shorts in each of these films. So that should hopefully create some level of comprehension
Yeah,
as we
definitely. If
talk
you're
through
having
these,
trouble,
because yeah.
yeah, if you're having trouble remembering a title, just let me know, and I can let you know what the name of it, that segment that I'm talking about is.
Oh yeah.
So.
But one thing off the bat that I would say, so dreading recalling some of these, I do think that this is a really untapped kind of format, like in films. A few of these films have been made, and actually, the more you look into them, you realize more of these exist. But honestly, I think this is a very, approachable format for aspiring filmmakers who,
Mhm.
have ideas for short films, but it's hard to kind of fluff that up to a feature length, and it's hard to know how to develop into a full story. You could just take like a bunch of similar ideas that you have and throw them together in one larger piece like this. And I think that that's really sort of untapped territory for indie filmmakers, or something that can be explored more. And I think these three films, for better for worse, show just the potential of the anthology. So I love these kind of films. It's also good if you're really OCD or ADHD and have a short attention span, because it keeps you engaged, because everything changes every so often.
Hmm.
A new change of scenery, you're following a different kind of character. So I find these very engaging type of movies.
It's also a great way of getting different filmmakers out there, like filmmakers you wouldn't really expect to see pop up in the limelight. But you watch one of these short films, and in the back of your mind, you're just like, who made this? Like, this is really interesting and intriguing. And
Hmm.
then, you look up their information on IMDb, and you learn more about the director, and the director gets a bit more notoriety because of it. Like, it's a great way of drawing attention to filmmakers that couldn't really get their films presented in any other way, which was funny enough, basically the concept behind Love, Death, and Robots, where David Fincher
Hmm.
and a bunch of other producers basically got together and brought forth a bunch of student filmmakers to make and give him a high budget to make these wonderful, well produced animated shorts. and that's basically what happened with the first season. Second season's not as good, but I still admire the ambition of the filmmakers and the animation behind it.
Yeah, I
No, it's
love
really
love
it's
Death
a
and
great way
Robots.
for people to collaborate and give these younger filmmakers a voice. Although for two of these films, these were actually helmed by singular directors or a pair of directors for Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So it's interesting seeing these different approaches where maybe a single director had a bunch of different ideas that kind of work together, but it's not an entire full story. Or in the case of Animatrix, it's a bunch of filmmakers who are working together in building up this world, kind of backstory lore that the Wachowskis have established. And I guess
Yeah,
that,
it's also a
go
really
ahead.
good place to experiment too, because
Yeah.
like I don't know if I would want to watch a full movie with like the one of the animation styles that will like address in the Matrix, but like in a short film format, it's really cool to look at, or really cool to kind of experiment and try out different styles and just explore the medium of film.
hmm And I guess we'll get into the Animatrix from here, but this came out in
Swoop.
2003, and this was a mass collaboration between 9 different anime uh, directors, which includes the names of Shinichiro Watanabe, uh, Takashi Koke. I'm not going to try to butcher these names, but these are really well-known directors. Peter Chung, that's well, one I can pronounce. Two, this is a director that my buddy Drew is absolutely, a huge fan of, with shows like Aeon Flux. And
Mhm.
I'll admit, when I first saw like his animation style, it wasn't something necessarily that I was like into at first, but seeing what he did with that in the Animatrix, which is like the last segment of the film, I thought was exceptional. Like it was really trippy getting to that segment, which we'll get into later. But I really dug Peter Chung's take on this. And what's really cool about this film, I remember seeing this when I was a younger kid, when I was really into the Matrix, and it was a bit risky when I was, renting it with my parents' money and then watching it because it's a lot edgier than the original Matrix films because I think you can get away with a lot more in animation that you couldn't in live action. And there's some like grotesque scenes in some of this. So
Oh yeah.
two of the most famous segments in this that the Wachowskis had a hand in writing themselves, kind of establishing really the backstory of how the world of the Matrix came to be, which is the Second Renaissance parts 1 and 2. This is what's really I think the core kind of tenets of the Matrix lore here, where it shows sort of the robot uprising. And I remember seeing some of those segments as a kid and just how, gory they were. Like they really honestly freaked me out when I saw them when I was younger. You know, there's some images you just can't unsee. Uh, Watching them now though, I really reflect on that. I really think it was a very effective way to kind of tell this story, um, and show how the world went into turmoil. And there's a lot more stuff that I picked up on this time watching it, like all the political stuff that led into
Oh
this.
yeah, definitely.
I,
Yep.
and
Like
like those are things that just went over my head when I was younger, right? But it really stands out now, and they do a really good job, kind of carefully laying the groundwork of building up to the world that would become the Matrix. And this came out, I think, just before or after the Matrix Reloaded, and this also plugged into the video game that came out, and that's what the first segment I think more directly um, leads up to. So this is like basically expanding on the Matrix lore, and I like the fact that the Wachowskis invited these different directors to give their own taste, their own spin, and look into this world. Like it really becomes a world where anything is possible.
yeah, no, definitely. The world building in this movie is incredible. Like you said, the backstory with the robots being like this exploited working class, and like, are they sentient? Did they suddenly become sentient? Like, they're protecting themselves? Was it like self defense? Like all these really complex questions are asked, and it's one of those things where like you watch it and you're like, God damn, like why weren't the sequels about this?
Yeah,
Right?
Like
I mean,
exactly.
I, and maybe I don't know if the studios were just shy about funding this kind of thing on a larger scale. I mean, I would have loved to have seen this kind of explored in more detail. Um, It's funny, I just remembered that I, Robot exists, and that came out around the same time. It explored kind of some of the same questions, but I think this does a slightly better job at it in a much smaller, lower budget format
and much less time.
than. Oh yeah, well, I mean, the original iRobot was written by Isaac Asimov, and he's great. And then they made a movie about it starring Will Smith. So
Very relevant. So,
yeah.
I guess at this point we should open up. What's your boy's favorite segment in this movie? This is a tricky one.
Oh
Yeah.
man, there's honestly, I really appreciated all of them. Watching it this time, like again, I haven't seen this in like 10, 15 years, so it's been a good while. But I think my favorite segment is still, I think it's Beyond, where these kids are
Yes.
going to this abandoned building and they're just exploring or finding out these sort of anomalies where gravity kind of doesn't exist in certain patches. And it's
Yeah,
just
the
like
haunted
it's just
house.
yeah, it's like these idea of this of the kids exploring glitches in the Matrix. Um, and that's really something that you really don't see in the original trilogy is like a child's perspective being in the Matrix and how freaky that must be where you discover these kind of things. There's something very mystical about it. But I think that might still be my favorite segment, though that's, you know, splitting
It's
hairs
also
with some other ones in here.
it's also a very kind of like slice of life feeling
Hmm.
to it. Like it's
Yeah.
just kind of
Yeah.
like a day in this girl's life where she comes across this weird kind of shit that's going on, and then like you know the next day it's gone. It's not there anymore. The magic's been sucked out, and it's like yeah, it's oh, man. I'm kind of upset that you picked that as your favorite because that was my favorite. So it's kind of like
All right, what's your second favorite?
um man, I really like Matrix Calculated, the one with
Yeah.
done by
That's a
H.
classical.
P-
Yeah,
P-
Peter.
Peter Chun, which I was gonna say is my second favorite as well. Man,
Yeah,
we
like I really dug the kind of idea of like these humans taking a robot and putting it in their own version of the Matrix in order to kind of teach it empathy and like the positive traits of humanity. And like it's all done visually, which is even more impressive.
Mhm.
Like, which makes
hmm
sense kind of too, like because like you can't really out logic a robot, but if you can like portray these emotions and these feelings, well then maybe you can break through to it, and it kind of does at the end. And the
and
ending of that is dark. Like,
Yeah, very
yeah,
foreboding.
it's super psychedelic that whole sequence and these transitions with these like fluid, colors and all this. I mean, it was just a visual treat on top of that.
Mhm.
Peter Chung has a very like distinct style. Like you can tell right away that this is his like art style in this, and and you'll recognize it if you're familiar with the show Eon Flux.
mhm.
Um, but it's really cool seeing him work with a much higher budget. Everything looks really polished. Like yeah, like that was my general impression with a lot of these shorts, just how polished a lot of these um, shorts look. They really gave a good sizable budget to all these directors to work on these, and they really
Mhm.
put so much work into the segments that they had.
For sure.
Yeah. What about you,
Mine's
Ian?
a bit of a strange one. I'm gonna pick Kid's Story. Like the animation
Ooh.
was like really unique and really cool. Like how it was kind of like intentionally rough around the edges and looked like a bunch of sketch art. But I think what really
Yeah.
sold it for me was the whole suicidal depression allegory behind it, where like
Mhm.
you don't know, life in a way just feels like a fabrication and you can't really separate reality or fiction anymore, so you just thinking that dying is a way to escape it all. And I think the ending is very much symbolic of it. Did he die at
hmm
the end? Did he go with Neo to wake up from the Matrix? We don't know. And that's
Well,
Yeah,
there's
it,
like
it's
really
like I mean they
horrifying spin on the idea of the Matrix, is
mhm.
we don't know if we're in that kind of reality or not. And that's what makes it so horrifying. That's something, again, like the films don't really explore as much. That just realizing that horrifying concept to the fullest potential, but just also the feeling that you're just alone in this miserable world, and the only way you can escape is just to take your life. There is something just, I
Oh,
don't know.
I
I'm
was I was
struggling to
gonna
find
say
the
the
mm,
words.
suicidal ideation aside, it is a pretty good short.
Yeah,
And
it's incredibly well done.
yeah. technically it is the backstory of that really annoying kid in the second Matrix film, the one that keeps sucking up to Neo. Because
Yeah.
and that was what happened to him, is that he kind of saved himself, although he gives Neo credit for that. And I,
I
and I, and I
mean,
do like that. I do love that rough around the edges kind of animation style. Like, it's a bold choice to just kind of leave it raw like that, but it works.
But also, you
yeah.
notice that when he left the Matrix, the animation was really smooth.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
And so there was some intention behind that. That was such a great attention to detail. And mentioning that it was the kid kind of ruins it a bit for me, because what makes it so
Well,
creepy
that's
to
who it
me was
was.
because, well, what made it so powerful to me was you didn't know if it was real or not, if he actually escaped in the Matrix, or if he died, or if he just straight up died in the real world and they were after him for a different reason. Like,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like
No,
that just gets to your head.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
it's
the way they
still
did it was very good.
Hmm.
yeah, it's still pretty ambiguous whether or not his death at the end is a death or a rebirth in a sense.
Hmm.
Like,
That's true.
I mean, you could argue that like, oh, he's escaping reality, but he's been born into this new reality, which may even be like worse than the one that he originally came from. I mean, it's kind of debatable. Another short kind of tackles that same subject, the one with the samurais.
Yes, that's my second favorite.
Yeah, what
Fucking
was
love
that
that
called?
short program.
Program, yes,
Yes,
program.
Mm-hmm.
it's so
Yeah.
good. The animation, that one is like so breathtaking. Like, going from the awful janky 3D animation the first short to that was like such a like a night and day experience, just witnessing this beautiful animation. But it's also like a very interesting concept on like refusing to accept the reality around you and choosing to put yourself in this fantastical world instead of dealing with your issues. And the twist at the end where it was all a training exercise. Normally I fucking hate twists like that, where it's like, oh, it was all a dream or it was all a test. But in the concept of the Matrix, it 100% works. And
Mhm.
there was build up to it where it's like, we know she's in a program, but we don't know how much of it is fabricated. And the fact that she had felt real emotions for this program that she was dealing with, it like really makes us question our own reality and what's real and what isn't. And it also makes us question just how attached we get to things that may or may not be real. Like, I thought that was really interesting. The way they use like this anime setting to explore that was kind of clever in a way, because going into the Animatrix, you're expecting like anime, over the top action, but to present that as more of like a dream world, as a fantasy that you have to attach yourselves to, I thought that was like a little clever subversion of that a little bit. I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah, program was great. Least favorite segment. This should be interesting.
Final Flight of the Osiris.
Yes, God,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
bad.
let's get the elephant out of the
it's
room.
not terrible. I mean,
I don't know.
well, it feels the closest to something that would be in an actual Matrix movie, and it is like a good bit of backstory. Fan servicey is all hell.
Oh man, yeah. I mean,
And
that
the
that
animation
ass,
is definitely
that
the most
ass.
dated. I mean, it's hard to hate it. And they actually had some pretty good texturing. Like, it really felt like skin, the way they textured it. But you could tell they were very limited with the tech at the time.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't know. Blizzard cutscenes from the late 90s and early 2000s look better than that. And they probably had less of a
oof.
budget to work with. I was pretty janky to me. And that, God, that sexy samurai fight was so
Yeah.
laughably stupid. It was only there to have like a contrived moment of, oh, they have this romantic chemistry. Don't you feel terrible that they're gonna die? Just when he said, um, I peaked. So did I. I bursted out loud laughing. Like, I woke up my mother because I was laughing so loud. I couldn't believe how stupid it was. And
Oh no,
yeah.
it's funny though. They're basically playing very elaborate, like, for strip poker, but with
Yeah,
samurai swords,
exactly.
and also blind. It's like blind strip samurai fighting.
Yeah, where's the fun
And
in that?
well, hey, for some people that's good foreplay.
Yeah, I mean, it's their fetish. I'm not gonna judge, but I don't know. Why do I have to watch it? And also,
I mean,
yeah,
you could critique it for being dangerous, but it's a simulation anyway.
just the fact that the short was essentially there just to push the technology and have action more than anything else. was also something that bugged me because the best shorts in this, it's much like Love, Death, and Robots in that sense, where the best shorts have something to offer. They present ideas that are interesting, horrifying to think about, but the worst ones are just action for the sake of action's sake and showing off technology more than anything else. And that one was just the epitome of that. And it felt really rushed and really stupid, and like there was more to it that was missing. It didn't feel like it fit the short film format. You
Yeah.
guys are gonna hate me for this. Not that it's bad, but I thought the second Renaissance was the second worst segment. It's not bad.
Ooh.
It's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautifully animated. I love the trippy vibes of it. And there was some like really effective horrifying imagery, like when they're beating that one robot to death, but just the fact that it was just essentially there to be a lore dump kind of took me off the experience a little bit personally. And
Yeah, I
I
can
don't
understand that.
know if you guys agree with this. I feel like fleshing out the robots in the way they do kind of took away the magic of the monster, like the creatures. Well, they're not creatures. I keep forgetting their names. I apologize.
The Sentinels.
Yeah, it kind of ruins the magic of the Sentinels to me, because what made the Sentinels so horrifying in the first film was we didn't know the nature behind them. Like we didn't know like
Mm-hmm.
how they were created or why they were created or how they came into being, but that sense of mystery made them so horrifying, like something Lovecraftian in a way
Mm-hmm.
that you can't wrap your head around. But giving them this motivation of, oh, they were robots that were just bullied. I don't know. It kind of took away the impact of the villains a bit for me. Kind of felt like it was over explained something that didn't need to be explained, and also I feel like it could have been one part. It could have been one part and would have been
Yeah.
satisfied, but stretching out to
True.
two,
Like
where the second
when
part is essentially just
when I
action.
think
Yeah.
back on them, I think mostly of the first part. I kind of forget what even happens in the second part. But like,
Well,
one
they
thought that
blend
did occur to
together
me is
and they
how
played back to back, so
yeah,
it's
they're
kind
played
of
back to
easy.
back. But
Mhm.
like, I think they could have spaced them out. Like, I feel like we should have seen part one earlier on. Then they could have
Hmm.
had some shorts in between to fill out other things, and then
Mhm.
part two would have maybe more impact if it was showed later. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if the ordering could have been changed because like you have that coming out of this whole mantra looking beautiful like this whole Zion archive thing. It's kind of like a computerized version of like the chakras or whatever. Like there's some mystical imagery there, and then
It should
you're
have been
kind
the
of
bookends. They should
yeah
have
it,
had
it,
the part
A
one be
hunch.
at the beginning and then part two at the end.
It should have been part one at the beginning, the final flight of Osiris, and a bunch of other stories in between. Like maybe Final Flight of the Osiris as like an action-packed lead up from the establishment from the first story, and then something maybe a
Hmm.
little slower, like maybe Beyond or a kid's story, something along those lines. And then, yeah, like you said, it should have bookended with part two. It just, as it is, mashing both of them together just felt really weird structurally. Like, I know even on the DVD, they recommended watching them individually in any order you want, but if you're watching this in the
Yeah.
intended order, there's some really strange pacing there. And I was going to bring up shorts, segments you thought were too long, and my answer is the Second Renaissance. Is there any other segments you guys thought were a little too long? Kind of overstayed their welcome?
Um, I think a detective story kind of ran a little bit longer than I would have liked.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, like, I really appreciate the film noir atmosphere, but like,
Mm-hmm.
the story was just kind of
It was kind of fan servicey. It's like, ooh,
it
here's
not even
Trinity.
fan surgery. It was yeah, it was basically just like, oh, we got a detective. He finds Trinity. He gets hunted down by the agents and dies at the end. I'm assuming, and
Yeah, he
like
does.
yeah.
Like a heroic sacrifice kind of thing.
I don't know. Like I have to check the length of that short, but it feels like it could have been done in a much shorter runtime.
Yeah, I agree. Devin, do you have an answer?
I mean that or Renaissance Part Two probably ran a little longer than it needed to.
Yeah, I feel like they should have mashed them together, but maybe trimmed down 4 minutes, and it would have been perfect.
I mean, all of these are still pretty short considering. I mean,
That's
the
true.
whole total runtime of this is an hour and 40 minutes, which, again, I'm really appreciating that shorter kind of runtime for these movies.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Oh, second question. Which segment did you feel was too short?
Mm.
World record.
Yes. God damn it!
Yeah.
Stop stealing my answers.
Yeah.
Why is
No,
it too
I
short, Ted?
mean, I love that short. I love that idea of like somebody pushing themselves to the limit and like just the full adrenaline like waking them up from the matrix. And
Hmm.
like
It
it's like
cut.
a really good concept, but I kind of would have liked to have seen what happened to him afterwards. Like they kind of
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
like they show a little bit where he's just like, okay, he's like injured, he's in a wheelchair, he might walk again, he might never. And like the agents are watching him now. But like I would have liked to have seen a little bit more. Like maybe he breaks out of the matrix, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe he gets deleted or something. Like they could have done a little bit more with
Or
it.
show
And
him in like a wheelchair, just kind of have him
Yeah.
contemplating like what could have been. Like a single
yeah,
scene of that would have been perfect.
Well, no, they had a scene where he's in the wheelchair and he tries standing up and walking
Oh,
again, and
that
he's
was
just
so
saying
corny too.
freedom. No, no, I actually really like that, but I did
Sit
find it cut off a
down.
little soon. I cut off pretty quickly though.
Ah,
Like it felt like it. Yeah, it was cut off from whatever the runtime was for
yeah,
some
for
reason.
sure. Yeah,
Did,
second
how do you
Renaissance
guys
should have
feel
been
about the
trimmed down.
how do
say
you
again?
guys feel about the animation style in that one?
I
I,
liked it, but man, there were some janky animations. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but I don't know if the budget ran out or something, but some of those running animations, I don't even know how to describe it. They kind of look like those, did you see like that scene from the Proud Family where Oscar is running really fast, but it's just his arms, his legs kind of spazzing in the air? That's what it looks like whenever
mhm.
there's like background extras. Like the main character running looks fantastic. Like it's just like it
Yeah.
feels like you're having this adrenaline rush as you're watching it. But anytime you see like the other characters running, like any of the Mr. Andersons or the nurse, it looks terrible. It looks
Yeah,
so
like
bad
it's
and
very
janky. It looks
it's
like their body arms are nothing is moving in a way that makes sense. And maybe that was intentional, but it just pulled me
it's
out of the
very
experience.
exaggerated.
Yeah.
I think it was intentional. I think that's the director's style. This guy also made Redline. I don't know if you guys have seen that film. That was a pretty
It's on
crazy
my
No.
movie.
list. It's supposed to be good.
But yeah, no, I think that was like some intentional stylistic choices that he made. But I thought he did a great job with that segment, and I really like that idea of someone who pushed their adrenaline so intensely that they broke out of the Matrix.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like the
Also, that's
animation's a
how you
little
break out the Matrix. I was aware there was a more complicated process to it, but you can just run out of the Matrix. That
Well,
was kind of
they
well,
were
weird.
pointing
no.
out that this is an absolute exception. That this is the only person that had ever done this, and they quickly kind of stamped him out
Okay, I
once he
must have
did.
missed that. All right, good to know.
No, they really laid that on thick. You must have been, I don't know, ruminating. That happens.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess the only segment we haven't talked about is we talked about it briefly, but matriculated. Now, I'm kind of conflicted
Yeah.
because the first half of it, I was kind of bored. Like, I was just like, oh no, this is going to be like Flight of Osiris, where it's just going to be about showing off practical effects. Like, oh, look how good our 3D effects are. But the second half is, like you said, Tad, really great. But I kind of wish we
Mhm.
didn't have to go through kind of like a weird slog of, like, just nonsensical action to get there. But also feel like that was kind of like a studio interference moment where it's like you gotta have some action, you gotta have some explosions in this weird trippy anime. But I kind of wish the whole thing was just about that and maybe fleshed out the ideas a little bit more with the scientist and like his
I don't
monologue
know how
is
much
great,
studio
but
interference there was. That
mhm.
feels very in line with Peter Chun's normal kind of MO. Like if you
Okay,
see
that's
Aeon
fair.
Flux and what he does, this is very much feels like something that he, had a lot of control over from the get-go. And I thought it was
I
great.
mean,
Like,
Yeah, it's great
and
overall. It just
apparently all the animators that were involved, they did say that like the Wachowskis were very creator friendly and let them kind
hmm,
of go about and do whatever they wanted to do. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there was very little create like studio interference on this, especially seeing it's
yeah,
like it's kind of low budget. So
that's true. But it just felt like I feel like that story should have had like a slow start and then descend into the action at the end. Like maybe just flesh out the characters a little bit more, maybe flesh out the ideas and the I really like the moral conflict between the girl and the guy where it's like You could just program to be a slave. It's like, yeah, but then he wouldn't have the right to choose. It wouldn't feel like it was his choice. Why does it need to be his choice? Like, why wouldn't it be? Like, that discussion is great, but it's way too short. So maybe just fleshing that out at the start of the story would have worked better for me. Like, I don't know. But the second half of it is great. Like, and it's more about an experience than anything else, and the psychology of like what it means to be human and what it means to be alive, and the ending
Okay.
basically showing like, well, those emotions can be used against you when it's stripped away.
I've got a question for you guys.
Ooh.
Mhm.
Let's add this to the list. If you had to take any one of these shorts and turn them into a full-length feature film, which would it be?
Ooh. That's a tough one. I'll let
I
you go
know.
first.
Mine would
I,
be Matcha Calculated. I think
I would
like
love to see that, definitely.
Yeah, that's up there.
But I remember Chris Stuckman was saying that he really liked the film noir segment and would want to see that turned into a feature.
That has a lot of potential. That was going to be my answer, if only because it has a lot of like a detective story in the world of the Matrix. Like, there's so much you could do with that. And like, you could plug yourself in and out of the Matrix. You could go into the Matrix to like pick up information or people, then get out of the Matrix. Like, I think that's a really cool concept that, with like a full feature film and like a good budget and like good talented enough actors focusing more on dialogue and tension building, I think that could be great. There's a lot of potential with that, even if the story itself isn't admittedly the greatest. There's something
Mhm.
there.
Okay. What about you, Dev?
Oh man, it's really hard to say. I mean, I just really appreciate the format that this is in. I feel like this is again something that more filmmakers could tackle, or like a way to kind of build on the lore of an established kind of franchise. And we did get something kind of like this when before Blade Runner 2049 came out. They released like 4 short films, kind of bridging the gap there. 2 of them were made by like Ridley Scott's son, so there's nepotism there, and they were kind of eh. But I really liked that they brought in I think it was Watanabe again, the guy who did Samurai Champloo to do Blade Runner 2022 Blackout, and I thought that that was an excellent thing. So it was cool to see this kind of thing happening again for another franchise. I mean, I hate to not give an answer, but I just really dig that this format was done for these shorts.
All right.
Fair enough. Fair
What
enough.
would you
Yeah.
guys give this the Animatrix overall out of 10?
I give it a solid 8. I thought it was, and I really appreciated seeing it again after all these years, because there was a lot that I didn't appreciate when I saw it when I was younger. There were certain segments that I dug, and other ones that I just thought were weird, just because the animation style was really bizarre and out there. Like I wasn't very cultured in different animation styles back then, and going from one to the other was quite jarring when I was younger. But watching them now, it felt like a delicious variety pack of different kind of animation styles that and different ways of lenses of looking into this world. So I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Nice. 10?
Um, yeah, I'll go a little lower. I'll give it a 7. Um, just because that Flight of the Osiris really kind of weighs it down.
I know.
Fair enough.
And like even all the shorts in a way they're not perfect. They all kind of have like an individual flaw, but like just it's just some are better than others. It's kind of the nature of anthology films in general.
Mixed
Um,
bag, but I personally just really enjoyed it. But I get it though. Like it is a mixed bag for sure.
if anything, like I really like the backstory that they're setting up here. I thought it's like incredibly nuanced and detailed. Um, and it does kind of show like the potential that the world of the Matrix has that you could argue just hasn't really been utilized yet.
Oh, agreed.
Not
Hmm.
so,
I'm giving this one a 6.9 out of 10. Really, the only thing holding
hey,
it back is that I really don't enjoy the first 3 segments very much, so the start of it is such a slog, and like you said, there's individual flaws. Like, a lot of the CGI hasn't held up too well. There's some weird writing choices and pacing issues here and there, but man, as soon as Kid's story hit, I was just thinking, yeah, this is it. this is more like it. And
Mhm.
from then on, the experience got a lot better and a lot more consistent. So
Oh yeah.
6.9 out of 10. If I had to rank them from best to worst, I got a list here. So from best to worst, here we go. Kids Story, Program, Beyond, Matriculated, World Record, a detective story, unfortunately, that had so much potential. The Second Renaissance, Parts 1 and 2, and Final Flight of the Osiris way at the bottom.
Mhm. I think if we had Steven on this podcast, he'd agree that Flood of the Osiris is a terrible, just excuse to show as much boobs and butts as possible, and for that reason, he'd give it a 10 out of 10.
Exactly.
I
Which
mean,
is
let's be
the
honest here. Is that butt maybe a bunch of ones and zeros, but that's a very nice looking one and zeros.
look the skin texture on it is pretty good for the time.
Uh, sp- Speaking of tits and
You
ass,
can you can
trick or
tell that
treat.
program works out.
Speaking of tits and ass, we've got trick or treat here. What is trick or treat? Well, you might not have known about trick or treat because it didn't get a theatrical release. Why did it not get a theatrical release? Well, I'm glad you
Yes.
asked. There are several theories as to why it didn't get a theatrical release. First off, there is a lot of child deaths in this movie. Hollywood, especially in the 2000s, do not like child deaths. And no matter how many times the studio told Michael Dougherty to remove them, he refused. So a lot of people believe that they pulled the movie from theaters for that reason. Another theory is that a Saw film was coming out, and Universal didn't want like two big like Halloween horror films butting heads at the box office, so they just pulled the plug. And unfortunately, Trick or Treat never got released beyond feeders and a straight to DVD release. But over the years, the film has gotten quite the cult following, and yeah, rightfully so, if you ask me. What's Trick or Treat about? Well, it takes place on Halloween, of course, where this cute little minion called Sam, he looks cute with his mask, not so much underneath the mask, but he gets involved in four different stories. One where we see a Ned Flanders serial killer trying to bury the dead body of a child while also getting annoyed by his son. A group of bimbos that you think are just typical horror movie bimbos that turn out to have a nasty little secret. Uh, the story of Brian Cox hilariously playing this crotchety old man dealing with the titular Sam, and the story of a bunch of children that try to pull a prank on a nerdy girl because it's always girls that get bullied in movies. I am so happy to talk about this movie because I freaking love this movie. It's one of my favorite horror films. It's so underrated. There's a lot of satisfying build-ups and payoffs. It's very well made for a first feature film, and I want to know your guys' thoughts before we delve into the questions.
So this film has been on my list for quite some time. I've actually had a copy of it borrowed from my friend Garrett because he wanted me to watch this quite some time ago, and around Halloween I meant to get to it, but I think I was just caught up with whatever our podcast features were, so I just never got around to it. So I'm really glad I finally did because I thought it was great. I mean, the first half of it, there was a lot of like cliche Halloween things, and it just seemed like a lot of very stuff that I'd seen before. But once it got to the this is minor spoilers. Once it got to the werewolf coven, and then the whole
Yes.
and then the whole segment with the old man, man, that's when it became like absolutely exceptional for me. Especially like I guess it was Brian Cox that played the old man, and the Burlatsat kid that's haunting him. I thought that was uh, I'm just, I'm just gonna give this off. I thought that was the best segment of the whole thing, and that's what really
Really?
tied it all together for me. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, there's a good build up and reveal to that as well that we'll get into for sure. Tad, what'd you think of Trick or Treat?
This is actually my first time ever seeing it.
I know.
So I've never seen it before today, and I was actually really surprised with it.
Hmm.
One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting, especially about the three films that we're watching, is they all kind of have different framing devices. Whereas like Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the framing device is like, oh, it's a book. We're reading different stories. Then you have like the Animatrix was doesn't even have a framing device. It's just titles, short, title, next short. And then you have this one where like all the short films are kind of edited together And the editing in this, I think, is easily the strongest part
Mm-hmm.
of this entire movie. It's both a strength and a detriment, which we can get in a little bit later. But like, yeah, overall, I really dug it. I really like the atmosphere. It feels like a Halloween movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, no, I was pleasantly surprised by this.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I
glad you.
think it definitely has the most cohesive structure because this really feels like following a single night, a single Halloween, and there's a lot of overlap between these stories. Like they feel like it's all happening in the same place at the same time, and he's just
Yeah,
following kind of different characters in this way. Like it feels more like a cohesive movie than just a straight up anthology. Because like the other two films, none of those stories really ultimately connect with each other. In the way that this does, where this feels like let's take one Halloween night and let's explore what these different characters are going through in this place.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Like one minute
Yeah.
you'll be watching a short film, and then you'll see like a character from another short film in the background, and
Yeah.
then like it's also told like not chronologically. So like a character will die, but then we'll watch another story, and we'll see them alive again. And like, yeah, I really dug that. I thought that was really cool.
Mm-hmm. Also, I'm glad you brought up the filmmaking, Tad, because this is Michael Dougherty's first feature film. It is incredibly well made for a first feature. Like it, I love the color
Wow.
grading, like the blue and orange color grading to reflect the season of Halloween. Like the editing's great, the soundtrack's super solid. It's incredibly well paced for an anthology film too. Like there were some segments I thought were a little too long and definitely better than others, but overall, like it moves by pretty fast. It's very entertaining. I was never bored. Like 80 minutes just felt like 40 minutes watching it again. It's just so incredibly well made from a filmmaking perspective. And there were actually some jump scares that got me. Like there was some genuinely great build up and tension in certain scenes. And one particular scene, which we'll get to, that is a great showcase of horror of the mind. But to start with, I'd like to ask, gentlemen, what's your favorite segment? Let's start with Tad.
Surprise party.
Oh,
The
surprise
Little
werewolf
Red
orgy.
Riding Hood werewolf one.
Yes, some great effects in
Yeah,
that scene too. Like I love the concept
Hmm.
of like tearing off the skin to find like the werewolves underneath. Like that's for a
yeah.
low
It's
budget.
almost
That
done
was
like
really
kind of like
impressive.
No,
it's
like
almost
what?
done kind of like a really creepy striptease
It's like body
with
horror.
like them removing their skin and like the werewolf underneath. Like I thought it was really cool.
hmm
Oh yeah, absolutely horrific. But that's also like the second I saw that, I'm like, okay, no, this is like next level. This is awesome.
Yeah, I know. And the build up to that too was really clever, like how you think they're just a bunch of bimbos that are gonna get killed off one by one with the, classic whole slasher movie trope. We see like the first girl die off and then he goes with her alone in the woods and the body drops and it's the body of Miss Creedy and you're like, wait, what the fuck? How did that happen? And
Oh,
then
No,
it just pays
and
off
there,
explosively.
foreshadowing.
there was there was good foreshadowing, good like
hmm
role reversal there, where he starts creeping up on this woman and starts biting her neck and sucking her blood and being all predatory like, and then the turns how the turns tabled later on.
I played her to get.
Yeah.
Oh
Or
fuck.
also like the she's the runt of the litter, it's her first time. We do this every year. Like so much dialogue that could be taken out of
Yeah.
context.
Or even at the
That works so
beginning
well.
where like the one sister is like, "Oh man, like my stomach's really upset from like
Oh, I
eating
had
Chinese or
no,
something
I
like
ate
that."
Mexican. Oh, that was so
Yeah,
good.
I ate
So
Mexican.
I laughed so hard at that. It's like I had some bad Mexican. I was like, oh, you clever fucking bastard.
Oh shit.
Clever bastard. Uh, Also, Devin, fuck you. Mr. Creedy's the best segment of the story. I have
Yes,
a
it is.
very oh well, I have a very sick sense of humor, so that segment just spoke to me. Like he's trying to bury this fat kid who I think he's a fat kid from Bad Santa, which is just reminds you of how
Oh yeah.
2000s this movie is. Anyways, he's trying to bury the kid in his backyard, and his son's yelling
No,
at him. It's like Charlie Brown's an asshole. Belly language, as if as if telling your son to watch his language is more important than burying a fucking dead body. See,
oh no,
some segment's so funny.
that was honestly really funny.
I
The way
know.
that played out.
Yeah,
It's terrible, but it was funny too.
yeah, it was
And
perfect for that.
and for some reason I didn't see the when he's talking about the jack-o'-lantern, what he meant until later on.
Oh, I like the build-up of that too, because like the way he's playing with the knife, like you think he's gonna stab the kid or something like that, but then you hear like the
Mhm.
stomach growl, and he's like, "You need a root beer," and I felt so bad for laughing really hard at that.
Oh
And it's
yeah.
like it's like the perfect dark comedy. It sets the tone really well, where it's like you shouldn't get attached to too many characters. You should welcome like a bit of camp, and the way the story's tied together with how Mr. Creedy sees what Brian Cox is going through. And he's like, "Keep your kid off my yard!" And you're like, "Wait a minute, we saw his kid inside. What does he mean, kid in his backyard?" And then you see like the little thing jump on him from the window, and you're like, "What the hell was that?" And you're just thinking about that in the back of your mind. And when you finally get to a story, it's like, yes, there's a satisfying payoff here. I was waiting for this moment. Like the film just has so many great moments like that, and it doesn't draw too much attention to it either. It didn't do it in a way that was too showy, so it just made it more satisfying as a result. But yeah, that segment is hilarious, and it's like, no, Daddy has a date. Oh, we never do anything together. Now, I wish we could go to the festival together. I wish Mommy was still alive, which, yeah, I'm pretty sure he killed his wife, and that's the first dead body in that fucking ditch.
Oh fuck, that was funny.
Oh,
I mean,
man. I love that
it's
segment.
it's 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 pitch black dark comedy and it's great.
Yeah, it's Krampus basically has that same kind of humor, and I think that movie is criminally underrated. I think people
I agree.
overhated that film. It
I don't think
basically
I've
is.
seen that.
Oh, you gotta watch it. The ending is something else. I'm not gonna spoil it. But anyways, moving on to the next question. What was your least favorite segment of the movie?
Mm.
Probably the school bus massacre
Oh,
story.
yes. It goes.
I mean,
Yeah.
okay, it's very cliche stock story about like, oh, we're gonna prank the poor nerdy girl,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
like, oh, what is like, there's the cliche twist of like, well, like the zombies are real kind of thing,
Also, the
and
child
like,
acting was really not great. You could tell Michael Downey just
yeah,
didn't have much experience of child actors at that point. And it's so manipulative, too. Like, oh no, the poor, chubby, nerdy girl is getting bullied. Also, like, this was. Why was this like an elaborate plan? Okay, so their plan was that she would somehow go down an elevator into a deep dark pit with some random fat kid she doesn't know, just all willy nilly, and leave the elevator too to go out into this strange environment. What if she just took the elevator and left? What if she just walked the other way when you guys went down? Your whole prank would fail. What the fuck? Like, it felt so stupid. Like, it felt like a Stephen King story, which maybe it was paying homage to that. All the stories feel like a homage in different ways. Like the Brian Cox story felt very Evil Dead. The Mr. Creedy story felt like a dark comedy, something along the lines of Reanimator, and obviously the werewolf bimbo story is a very slasher movie, very a little bit of body horror mixed in. So maybe that was like paying homage to Stephen King films, but man, I expected the bully to pull a switchblade at some point because that's not how bullies work, and it just made me roll my eyes harder
the
than
only kind
the
of
blonde
thing
girl rolled her eyes.
the only kind of thing about that segment that I thought was kind of interesting and kind of fucking dark was that the parents of the mentally handicapped children paid the bus driver to kill the kids because they were too much of a burden. And I'm like, that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah,
But
that's
like
really dark,
also
interesting
like
film.
an interesting kind of, yeah, and like they just kind of never really went anywhere with that.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, like even though it's my least favorite segment, there's still things I like about it. Like it's still incredibly well shot and atmospheric. There's like great music. The flashback, I love how like oversaturated it looks and how the water almost looks like kind of maple syrup or pumpkin juice to kind of match that flavor of the season. And the acting in that scene is actually pretty good too. Better child performances in that scene than the the child performances from the other actors. And there's two things in particular, moments in particular, I really liked in that segment. First moment was when the kid casually mentioned like his teacher was butt fucking a pig. That made me laugh pretty hard. And secondly, when she leaves and we hear like the screams of the children, that is some grade A horror of the mind shit. Like that is
Yeah.
so much creepier because we don't see what happens to the kids. And I thought that was really, really clever
Yeah,
and
when
well
it plays
handled.
with your imagination like that, that's where it's like most effective, and
Hmm.
especially on a lower
Mhm.
budget like this. And even like the effects that they had were really impressive considering the budget.
Yeah.
Even though there were some clear kind of you know fake prosthetics and other cutaways, it still kind of works. It's very expertly handled.
Hmm. It's very
But
charming too.
yeah, and they're very selective with when and where they use it, which I think is what makes it work.
Yeah, they knew where the money was. Like they weren't over ambitious in their budget, so they tried to work around it. And also, like this whole film feels like a student film with a budget, and I mean that in a good way. Where it's like you could tell everybody just had a blast making it. That's very simple story, very fun tone and atmosphere to it, and it adds to the charm and fun of the movie too. I kind of wish more horror movies were like that in a sense, where it knows what it is, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it does something clever and creative with its storytelling.
Well, apparently, also filming this movie was kind of a nightmare
Yeah.
because like they they had like a very small shooting schedule and they got rained out like a good portion of their schedule. So like a lot of the scenes that we see, there's like a huge tarp overhead trying to like block out the rain.
Yeah,
Damn.
a lot. That's why everything. Yeah, the director said like everything looks so damp. Like they didn't want it that way, but it just wouldn't
Mhm.
stop fucking raining in certain scenes. I think like they straight up had to reuse footage of the extras at the party just only because they couldn't get more footage because it wouldn't stop raining. Like I
But it
I
looked
kind
think
of
into
worked.
it too. Yeah.
I think it works, and actually I really love when everything does kind of look damp. It adds a lot more natural
Mhm.
contrast to the landscape.
I agree,
So
and maybe it's just a city that rains a lot. You know?
it's a good way to take a problem and make it work for you. Like, okay, we're dealing with all this rain. We can't shoot when it is raining, but our landscape looks a little more textured and looks a little more, saturated after the rain. And I think it adds to the atmosphere when you have just that little bit of dampness, and then you have these like harsh light sources and just Halloween kind of decor and other kind of lights happening. It just really adds to the atmosphere and the texture of the look of the film, which really made it look more professional. And I'm surprised that this is this guy's first feature film.
I know.
And I think it's so impressive. And also, I really like the approach where he maybe didn't have like a solid idea for an entire film, but by having these smaller ideas kind of be interconnected together in one film, it's a perfect like watching during Halloween season type of film because it makes you feel like everybody's having their own little Halloween experience, their own Halloween
Yeah,
kind of
it's like
thing
one
going on,
long bad night.
and you're getting kind of a view of all of it happening at once.
The beginning feels like you're going out for Halloween, and the ending feels like you're coming home from Halloween. Like it's a perfect
Exactly.
mixture.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa,
Fucking
blew your
true.
mind.
I wish I watched it on Halloween now because I'm watching in the middle of May.
Watch it
But
again for Halloween.
no, I'm definitely all primed for it now. Like I'm gonna fully appreciate it in
Yeah,
this
for sure.
October.
Also, next question. Did you guys feel like there was a segment that was a little too long?
Probably the bus segment with the kids. I mean, I really like the premise of that, but the acting definitely didn't quite sell it as well as they wanted it to.
Yeah, that's
Which
just it.
I'm not gonna rag
Yeah.
on the kids for their acting because they're kids. And you can only expect so much. But yeah, I mean, it took a while for me to get fully into it. Like even with like the dark comedy of the first bit, I wasn't 100% feeling it until we got to like the whole wolf coven,
uh,
and
yeah.
then I was fully into it.
I felt like the Brian Cox segment was just a little too long for me. Like I
Oh,
feel like there's a great
I mean,
tension and build up and payoff, but the actual fight with Sam I thought was a little too drawn out. Like I feel like that could have been
maybe
cut
yeah,
short a little bit. And also
maybe,
it's
but
very
I
weird
does it,
yeah,
but
pacing wise for me.
does it feel that way?
it worked
Does
for
it feel
me.
that way because you have to watch the same scene that you've already seen again?
Oh, that part I loved. Like the way it
Oh,
actually
really?
connected. Yeah, that part of it I actually really liked. Just that whole interconnected feel and the satisfying payoff to what you've been waiting for. But I also feel like it was a little weird pacing wise because the werewolf scene, like, to me, that's it. Like, that's the explosive, crazy, insane climax we've been building it up to. So, to have a scene like that, only to have a flashback to, like, a slower build up to a completely different story, I don't know. I feel like that should have played out before the payoff of the werewolves to me. Or maybe it should have connected with other stories a bit more, or we should have seen bits and pieces. Like, I feel like just slapping that on at the end of the movie felt really weird pacing wise to me. But again, there is a lot I love about it. The effects of Sam were really well done. Uh, Brian Cox's "You gotta be fucking kidding me" made me laugh pretty hard, and it's like a great mixture of like camp and genuine horror. And there's this jump scare with Sam that actually got me when he like jumped through the house and he blew up the lights. I was like, holy shit! I never get affected by jump scares, but that actually got me. And this is my first time watching it. Good on you, movie. Segment that was too short?
I don't know. Was there? I don't think there really was. Like, I would have kind of liked to seen maybe more of the werewolf girls, but like
Maybe. But
too much of a good thing is also not a good thing, right? Like,
No,
so
I thought it was very well paced and nothing dragged out too long or overstayed its welcome. I thought they did a really good job
yeah,
I'd agree on that
pacing
sense,
this
yeah.
out. So I think they did a really solid job with it overall, and it just hits home this concept of trick or treat. I'm wondering, was this based on like some comic book series? Because I keep seeing these overlays of comic book
I don't
like
believe so,
segments.
but it is and heavily inspired by Creepshow, which I believe was
Mm-hmm.
based off a
Because
comic
yeah,
book.
and Tales from the Crypt. So
Yeah,
this
that
is what
too.
it made me think of. It made me think that there was some comic book series, and then this was an adaptation of it. But
It
if
is not.
not, I'd like to see it turn into a comic book series if it hasn't already.
Yes. Oh, I would
yeah,
so or like a Love, Death, and Robots kind of interpretation of Trick or Treat. Just expand on these crazy Halloween stories with these all of these like
Mm.
interconnected short films. Like something like that would be really cool. Just some kind of
That's
expansion.
what this felt like watching. It felt like that this was an adaptation of a bunch of of a little comic series.
hmm And I think that's very much what it's going for sure. I felt like the story with the couple at the beginning, like it's a great like way to show like oh you shouldn't get connected to any of these characters, and here's some like really weird out there humor. The guy's gonna fucking asphyxiate himself unconscious while his wife gets murdered in his front yard. But I feel like fleshing out their story could have been like entertaining of all these crazy stories, and they're like the one couple that was just having a normal night. Like maybe interconnecting them with all of the characters' stories in some way would have been kind of entertaining, and maybe
I
like
mean they
balanced out
are
the
kind
weird
of
pacing with
interconnected.
Brian Cox. It is interconnected with other stories, but maybe just fleshed
Yeah,
out a
like
tinsy bit more.
like they're like in the background, and I think in the werewolf segment, like the one vampire guy kills the girl, and she like grabs onto her
Yeah,
costume or
she's drunk, honey.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, which kind of is an interesting idea. I never really thought about it until this movie, but like if there was ever a time period to like get away with murder, it's kind of around Halloween.
That was such a clever scene too. Like just like oh she's
Like,
covered in blood and screaming. Well, guess what? You're in a party where plenty of people are covered in blood and screaming with
right?
these
Yeah.
Like
intense
that's kind of a
costumes.
scary thought.
It's a terrifying thought, and they pull it off greatly, and they even laid her body down next to like next to a guy that's also covered in blood and also unconscious. Like that's a really cool
I,
concept.
I think we should put a disclaimer on this podcast. We don't condone murder, so don't get any ideas. We're
But
just
also, if you're
noticing.
gonna do it, you know, this is a pretty good place.
But
But also
but
don't.
you didn't hear that from us. We're not in the business of giving bad people good ideas.
Or are we?
But no, that's no. I really like how those segments played out. Ultimately, like just yeah, the fact that she's covered in blood and so is everyone else. It's really hard to detect, which it can be seen as like a horror trope. But I thought they did a really good job with it here.
Nice.
Like I'm blown away that this is still like a first feature film because
I know.
it was really expertly done.
It's insane. Like, Michael Dougherty is along the lines of James Wan for me, where some of his films are definitely better than others, but all of them just have this campy, fun nerdy student film vibe to them where I just can't be mad at any of his work. Like his work is all just so weirdly charming. Like even when he's doing a Godzilla movie or uh, like a Christmas horror movie with Krampus, like he's just he has a very charming feel to his movies. He's the kind of director where even if he makes something bad, it's like, "Aw, you tried," instead of just the same cynical anger I have towards like big
I
budget
had no
schlock.
idea he did the Godzilla movies. What the hell?
He did King of
He
the
did the
Monsters.
second one.
He did King of the
He
Yeah.
Monsters.
he did King of Monsters, and I think versus Kong as
Nope,
well.
that was Adam
No,
Wingard.
King.
Okay,
Yeah.
no. Anyhow,
Anyhow,
it's cool to see how that came up. Apparently, there's a sequel to this, or no, it's a book, I guess. Trick or Treat: Days of Dead.
yeah,
Days of the Dead.
Yeah.
Fuck
They
yeah.
have been trying to get a sequel off the ground too, like an actual movie sequel, but
and nothing.
I think since like 2013 or whatever. But
Damn,
yeah, it's been a while.
I'd
Yeah,
watch
I don't
that.
think-
Me too.
I would too. Hell yeah.
Hopefully Michael Dowdy would be involved somehow. Even if he just made one segment, I would be really happy just seeing him return to this world because, yeah, he did a great job of this one. Some segments are better than others. There's some weird plot conveniences. How did nobody notice the fucking shotgun going off next door?
Yeah.
That was a little weird. Also, Brian Cox got professionally done surgery in the span of a couple hours, apparently, or the span of an hour, because that all took place on the same night. That was a little weird, but overall, great film. One of my favorites. Please watch it if you haven't. It is worth your attention, especially if you're a horror fan. And I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10.
Solid.
Nice. What
Yeah.
about you guys?
I'll give it a 6.9.
Nice.
Oh, why so low?
I
Bruh.
don't know. Like for me, the editing is both like a pro and a con, just due to the fact that like, you know, every time it would cut to the Halloween school bus massacre segment, I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
Move
I
on. It's
agree.
not
I was
like
just
a
like, let's get back to the
regular
werewolves. Come on.
Well, yeah. Well, it's not like a regular anthology film where you can just be like, oh, well, like I don't like this segment, I'll just skip it, because you know it's interspersed with all the rest. So like, that's the only thing that's kind of holding it back for me just a little bit. But yeah, other than that, like I really liked it. Like I would definitely give it a 6.9. So
Nice.
I think I need to see it again and really appreciate some of the stuff from the beginning, because it took me a little bit to get into it, just because some of the first segments felt like, you know, your stereotypical kind of Halloween stuff, and it's not quite
Even
in
Mr.
season, so I
Creepy?
wasn't quite. Well, I'm gonna split that diff and give it a 7.5. I think it's a solid film, but I would be up for rewatching it when it's in season.
How comfortable is that fence you're saying on?
Oh, quite comfortable. I'm very used to it at this point on the show. I'm always
Nice.
kind of bridging the gap between two argumentative hosts.
Oh, I almost forgot. Best to worst, trick or treat. Best segments to worst segments. Mr. Creedy, the werewolf orgy, the bus driver, and the children. Oh yeah, spoiler alert. Brian Cox is the bus driver. I think we forgot to mention that.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
The old man segment's still my favorite. I think that was that was the pinnacle, or the thing that it was building all toward.
Yeah.
That whole, you know, experience that he was going through and the horror of it. I love how, like, you know, the kid looked like he was gonna kill him at the end, but all he wanted was candy. It
Aw.
almost felt like Scrooge for people who don't give out candy on Halloween.
Or they break the rules on Halloween.
which I kind
Yeah.
of I do also like that Michael went into this film with the intention of kind of like creating a Halloween icon in the spirit of like the Easter Bunny and like Santa
He
Claus.
succeeded.
And, like, this
Yeah.
this
The
figure
burlap
that,
sad kid. The burlap
Yeah.
sad pumpkin kid. Yeah.
Yep. He's adorable,
Yeah,
even when he looks like a monstrosity.
He's adorable yet creepy and mysterious. But there's also something warm and wholesome about it.
Yeah,
I know.
but he also like perfectly encapsulates the holidays. He follows their traditions. He, you know, he like you said, he's like a combination of both creepy and cute. Like he's the Easter Bunny of fucking Halloween.
He murders your ass when you don't follow the rules. That's very Halloween. Anyways, next movie.
Just like that. That's the most abrupt segue I think we've had yet.
Ah, that's saying something. That's saying something. Tad, would you
Segue
like to
time.
introduce Buster Scruggs?
The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Ah,
It's
yeah.
a Western film directed by the Coen brothers. It's 6 individual segments, each kind of detailing or going into like different aspects of the Western genre. And yeah, I mean, like, what else is there to really say? It's a Western anthology film directed by the Coen brothers. Like, if that doesn't sell you on it already, I mean, I don't know what will.
Well, you know what's crazy? I remember this came out in 2018, and it's new Coen Brothers movie. It's a western. It's anthology. Great. I'll get to it sometime. And then I didn't get to it for a while. It was just like another thing that was worth seeing at some point. But I don't know. I didn't have a sense of urgency when it came to watching this. Like when it was first announced, and then I'm like, oh, I'm finally gonna get to it for this episode, and it was the first one that I watched. And off the bat, I just forgot how sharp-witted the Coens are with the writing.
Yeah.
Man, like the second I'll tell you that the second that I was sold with the writing and the presentation of this film, the second Buster Scruggs said misanthrope, I don't know, that just hooked me.
Or
It's like
ah.
misanthrope. I don't hate my fellow man, and the way it's just so damn funny. And I don't know what it is. Like the Coens just seem to be so infatuated with the West or with like Southern accents. And here's the thing about Southern accents, and this is something that Steven, I'm sure, will dispute. They have the unfortunate reputation in media and probably just cultural perception of the Northern Americas, uh, that Southern accent correlates with not very smart. So it's such a delightful contrast to hear very sharp, intelligent dialogue using words that I have to look up in a dictionary with these Southern accents. There's kind of a contrast there, but it's something also worth appreciating. Like it's not necessarily how people would talk, especially not today, but there's something very poetic and believable in how they present it. I mean, I just really adored the writing of this.
Now,
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna cut y'all some slack, seeing that you're grieving and all, but the fact is, your brother Steph was more in the nature of a suicide. uh, Tad, what'd you think
Exactly.
of this movie?
Just hearing this poetic, sharp, well-written dialogue in these southern drawl is very charming.
Yeah, it's so engaging in that sense.
Yeah.
But Tad, what'd you think overall?
Oh, I love this film. Like, I would honestly say that this is probably one of my favorite westerns ever.
Would you say
Yeah.
it's top tier Coen Brothers?
Oh,
It
and yeah, definitely.
it's right up there. It's honestly up there. Like,
I agree.
Well, it's
yeah.
also just like this perfect film that shows just how flexible and talented the Coen brothers really are, to go from like a kind of goofy comedy to like a really dark and depressing story to something kind of more like optimistic and romantic to something a little mysterious. Like, it plays all the gambits, and like it just
Mhm.
It fires on all
it's
cylinders. Like it just
yeah.
nails every single story it's going for, and the fact that they all have this interconnected theme of death and how different people deal with it in their daily lives under the setting of the West, one of the most dangerous times to live in the nature of history, is really just something to admire. And I guess that means we should open up with what was your boy's favorite segment, and I feel like this is gonna be a tough one for this film.
Oh fuck. I
Um,
mean,
I know
they're
exactly what my favorite segment is. It's Buster Scruggs. It's that segment.
right
It's
off the bat,
if
eh?
Yeah,
if anything, the only flaw this film has is that it started with its best segment. It played its best card too early, because like afterwards it's like, oh, these segments are really good, but like, I'm sorry, that Buster Scruggs segment is still probably my favorite. I just love this kind of like Bugs Bunny-esque figure going from town to town and
it's
like never
City.
starting the fights, but he always finishes them. Like,
He'll murder a
it's
guy and then scene about it.
I mean, it's
and
weird to
him
me
like
that the whole
Nelson.
film is named after it, but it's also easy to see just as it is such a awesome segment. It's a great way to open up the whole thing. And that's not to take away from
Absolutely.
all the other segments. Like all the other segments had some excellent stuff in them. Like all of these stories had some nugget of gold in them, which
Hey.
hey, that subtle foreshadowing. I actually really liked the gold nugget one. I thought that was really cool. I really liked they, they do such a good job with dramatic irony in all of these, like the way that they play with fate and oh, I shot this person dead, but he's actually not dead, and then this other person died and shouldn't have. And man, there are some moments in this that really spoke to me. But the story with the woman and her whose husband dies as they're going on this
Ooh, the cow got rattled.
yeah,
And that was her
and
Yeah.
then yeah, no, I think that segment really I think resonated the most emotionally. Um, it's really hard to pick though because I really like that one, but I also really like the very last one with the six or the five people in the
Yes.
carriage just having the conversation, and you this is personality clash and almost kind of semi-articulated philosophical discussion that they all have. I thought was really good. It was a great way to end the whole thing on kind of a more morose note, but it works.
Yeah, and I really like the allegory in that segment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Them
Yeah,
kind of being like carted off to the afterlife.
Yeah,
yeah, he
were
says
they?
I like looking at them as they try to make sense of it. Dude,
Also,
It was a great
that
build
was
up
so
and reveal
bone
too.
chilling the
Yeah.
way he said it. Oh man.
what a technological achievement in that of just like the lighting in that one segment, how it starts as like sundown and then like it just gets like it, as the segment goes on, it just gets darker and darker and like that blue light comes in. It's just chef
Yeah.
kisses, like
Oh, it's
beautiful.
beautifully shot. I don't know if Roger Deakins was behind this one, but I thought they
It's Bruno
who
Delbonnel, who also shot Inside Llewellyn Davis and The Tragedy of Macbeth. It was not
oh
Roger
wow.
Deakins. And
Well,
yeah,
I thought he did an excellent job anyhow.
agreed. Like, it looks beautiful. Like, the lighting is really great in particular. Like you said, it fits the vibe of each story really well. And it's not too showy, I thought, but it still has a lot of visual storytelling involved. It still piques your interest with every frame without drawing too much attention to itself. My favorite segment, one, speaking of visual storytelling, Meal Ticket. Just an absolutely wonderful, heartbreaking
I was
segment.
just about to say that one probably has like the most bleak ending to it. Like, oh
Yep.
man.
And
The,
yeah,
so
normally,
it's like it's that segment where there's the man that has no limbs who's basically just being peddled around as this sideshow attraction, and he has this rehearsed kind of stitching together of a bunch of
Ozymandias.
soliloquies. Yeah, it goes from Ozymandias to by the people for the people. Like he strings together all these things to show I may have no IMS. That doesn't mean I'm unintelligent. But the way he performs a show is basically just like you would an animatronic robot that repeats lines. Um, that's probably how his caretaker saw him as just this thing that he feeds carts around, and once he starts getting diminishing returns, he replaces him with a fucking chicken.
Yep. Well,
I
that's
fucking
also I normally hate the message of artistry is being shunned for simple entertainment, but A, it fits perfectly in the Western setting, and B, it's such a powerful, potent way of saying that because we grow attached to his character and his journey as his caretaker is just dragging him around forcefully and forcing him to witness him getting fucking a stripper, which is horrifying in of itself.
Oh,
But
yeah, he just faces him away,
yeah,
and
as if that
he doesn't
helps.
even consider him. Which, well,
oh,
so this is what I love about all these in general. But there's some great exception of like showing not too much. It's like you're saying a lot by saying very little.
Mm-hmm.
Like the prostitute asks him, "Does he want 11?" He says, "No, I don't think so." And he says, "Did he have him before?" And he said, "Once." So maybe there was like a bad experience that happened beforehand. Like it just very vaguely alludes to it, but you get enough from that. And then toward the end, when he steps out of the cart and he drops the rock over the water, then looks back at him.
Oh yeah, you know
That
exactly
was
what's
all you
coming.
needed to know exactly what he was gonna do, and I could feel my heart sink the second he looked back at him like that, and he starts walking up to him all coyly with his hands behind his back, and he just starts smiling at him, and then it just
Ugh.
fades to black, comes back in, and he's gone.
Yeah,
So
so
Oh,
perfectly made. The visual storytelling is great. The music is beautiful in that segment. Music is great in all segments, but I thought the music in that in particular was like very well done. But the
I'm
Gal
gonna be
Got
bold.
Rattled has a great
I
soundtrack.
yeah. I'm
Obviously,
gonna I'm
yeah.
gonna be bold. I think the Coens made a better Western than Tarantino did with The Hateful Eight.
I agree.
ooh,
I agree
And
okay,
wholeheartedly.
interesting.
I remember being so sold on that film, like going into it, because it was this whole 70 millimeter exhibition. I went like downtown Toronto to see the one theater in all of Ontario that was showing it, and I enjoyed it when it came out, but I didn't think about it much afterwards. I almost forgot it existed almost entirely. Uh, this I think just packs more of a punch because I think they, with all these little stories, they just pack so much into each one of them that they all have an impact. They all have a lasting kind of impression, and then they all compacted into this one runtime. So,
Well, it's also like a good showing of how flexible the Western genre is, that you can do like all these
hmm
other genres still set in it.
it
Like,
really made it feel alive. Like it feels like there is a real world outside of what we see in the frame. Like it feels like this is just what life was for people at
mhm.
this time period. Like this doesn't feel like like a gimmick, like everyone's just dressing up in the West. This feels like this is just what the world was, and you're just seeing it in a multifaceted way, and it just happens to take place during
Yeah,
the Old West.
it feels very honest, while
hmm
also
Yeah,
not being too serious. That doesn't have a sense of humor about things. Like even the last segment, which is pretty miserable, has some really funny line deliveries. Like I like how the hunter was like just casually mentions his sexual encounters, while everyone else in the wagon
people
just has
are
to
like ferrets.
or back a ferret. But I swat out in the lodge for a couple of hours. Okay, I was done laughing. Anyways, to more serious matters. Least favorite segment in the movie. This should be interesting.
Oh man,
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Devin.
it's really hard to say. I mean, Buster Scruggs was a great way to open, and he absolutely leaves an impression from that. And I do think that they cut it off like right at the right time when it runs out of steam. Um, I can't remember what happened immediately after that one.
Oh, near Alcadones. That's the one with
Yeah,
James
the James
Franco.
Franco and
You ever
yeah.
been robbed?
Okay. I mean, aside from the meme, that one probably just had the least of an impression on me.
Yeah, it's a little
The
too short, I think.
it's a good meme though. Like
Yeah.
first time when he's about to get hung.
Yeah,
So I'd say just that would be my least favorite, just because it left less of impression in me in recall. But it's a good meme, and it's still a decent segment and a great anthology.
for sure. What about
Yeah,
you, Ted?
I'm gonna be a little controversial here. I think the gal who got rattled is probably my least favorite. And again, that's not to say
Hmm.
like it's terrible. It's just
That's a lot of people's least favorite, in fairness. A lot of people
it's
think the film
it's.
just
I think
drops
it's
off
just
at
a.
that point.
It drags a little
Yeah,
bit,
it's
but I do think I really loved, well, the way it ended. I think really was bittersweet.
Yeah,
the ending
there's a
does
lot of
say
great
it. Yeah.
dialogue in that one too,
Yeah.
and I love the theme of. It really cements like how much of a pain in the ass it is to deal with someone after they're dead. Like, you
hmm
gotta, you dig their body, but then you have to deal with the fact that their body was buried somewhere else. You have to deal with their responsibilities. You have to deal with their dog. You have to deal with their money,
Oh
and I
yeah.
felt like it was a great way to just cement just how awful but how annoying it is to move on from someone after they passed.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I thought you were gonna say it was your least favorite segment because there was attempted dog murder.
yeah. Well, Paul Dano's wife
Off
did a good
screen
job.
too. Yeah.
It was attempted. Well, was it attempted?
It was attempted off screen dog murder, and the dog got away before he could, and you hear him yipping in the
Did
background.
he get away, or did he just let him go?
No, no, the dog made it out
Yeah.
alive in the end, and she's the one
Yeah.
that died by her own hand,
Yeah, I
which
love
was
the
so
ending.
sad.
I will
Oh man,
agree it's too long, but I personally think. I'm
it
sorry,
was definitely
Devin.
the slowest. It was definitely the
Yeah,
slowest of
for
them.
sure. But I feel like it kind of earned that. But yeah, I will agree it was
hmm
a little too long. And the final gunfight was good, but again, that was also dragged on a little bit longer than it needed to be. Like, I kind of got the point of where it was going after a little while. I was like, all right, we could just move on to the next story. I love Tom Waits vibing in the Alaskan North, but All Gold Canyon's probably my least favorite. And Tom Waits does a great job. It has a great ending, but I don't really. I knew what the other stories were going for. I don't really know the point of that story beyond just like hard work pays off, I guess, and the lazy get punished. But I felt like the other film stories had much more to chew on. And outside of the ending, I was and
True.
Tom Waits, excellent
Oh
performance.
yeah, no, I absolutely love Tom Waits. Like the second
Yeah.
I saw him, like, okay, yeah, I love this. Just
Hello, Mr. Pocket.
he's one of my favorite musicians. I kind of do the voice. I'm not gonna butcher your ears with that right now, but
Hello,
man,
Mr.
he's
Pocket.
Hello, Mr. Pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean,
That's a
I
great
think
ending,
I
though.
like
Like, I
all.
just love. It's the equivalent of call an ambulance, but not for me.
yeah.
He's an old man too, so it fits.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that kind of elevates that film above the gal who got rattled for me is just I really like visual storytelling. So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that there wasn't very much dialogue in that short kind of like really it just put me in a good mood. And it was just kind of interesting seeing like him go through the motions and do this
Yeah,
kind of
he has a good method.
yeah, it's a great method, and
It's
it's just
yeah,
like, and his hard work pays off, like you said. And when he finally finds that gold, you're just like, holy shit! Like,
yeah. And then you see the shot of the guy, you're like, no. And then he gets
Yeah.
revenge. You're like, get him.
Oh man, like the way the way your heart just sinks. Like the second you see that shadow and you know something bad is about to happen.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, it's really saying something about the film that that's my least favorite segment, and I still had a blast watching it. It was still well done in a lot of ways, just not as good as the rest of the segments for me. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
I guess we already answered the segment that was too long with the gal who got rattled. But what about a segment that was too short?
uh, Buster Scruggs.
Near Alcadone. Nah, Buster
I
Scruggs was just right.
100%. I would watch an entire movie with that character.
I'd watch an
Cohen's, if
entire
you're
movie of any
listening,
of these
please,
characters.
like,
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, no,
I
100%.
think they made a smart move though
I
by
just
really.
really,
I think they had a bunch of ideas for westerns and they just decided to throw them all together into one film because I feel like they may have realized that they might have run out of steam with any one of these ideas. So they tried to extend it to a feature length, and they just had maybe too many good ideas that they decided to just put as much work into making them all fit into one and having them be their own individual segments. I feel like that just gave it the most amount of potency and impact. So I think the way they approached doing this for a feature I thought was awesome, and I think it works exceptionally well. And I really want to see this done more. Like again, like I feel like this anthology format is still kind of underrated. Like you see it sometimes, but not all that often. And I feel like the amount of potential for it is great. And I also really like that for this episode, as chaotic as it is, the fact that we have like three different anthologies and three different genres entirely,
Mm,
um, just shows just how flexible this format is for any style of filmmaking.
agreed. I wanted to say Near
yeah,
Alcadone
that makes
was
sense.
my choice. Like it's, it definitely felt like they just rushed to the finish line. Like they didn't have enough time to flesh out the story as much as I did. Like Ralph Ineson, come on, that man has an amazing voice. You're gonna waste him in one quick scene. Come on, flesh him out a little bit more. And like it's, I feel like that's
Yeah,
where the quirkiness gets in the way just a little bit. Like it's funny, but I feel like it was and it's really well written and really sharp. I just love the segment with the sheriff where it's like, did he do it? It's like, well, we believe so. Good enough, hang him. Like it's just like I don't care. That's good enough. Just fucking hang him. And like the desensitization of death is a very common theme in the Coen Brothers. And I feel like that was a good way of putting it. Like, yeah, I've hanged so many people today. I don't, I don't really feel like doing a proper trial. Just throw them on, get it over with.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
also,
I
Devin, I
really
wanted to
like the bank
ask.
teller in that segment.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah,
You ever been robbed? Oh,
have you ever
sure.
been
Yes, I
robbed?
have.
Oh,
Yeah,
the way he just goes into a long-winded story.
And they pulls out his
yeah,
gun.
lost
It's
it
like,
in the vault
oh,
there.
in Western Phoenix. Also,
And then
pan
the
shot.
fact that he had like 3 shotguns loaded and ready at the bottom, in case of an event like this,
He's a bank in the
was
middle of
hilarious.
nowhere. How else are you gonna
And
prepare for it?
and,
Bank
and,
run.
and then he comes running out covered in pots and pans with
Yeah.
a gun. Pan shot. Oh fuck, that was so funny.
Oh yeah, I burst out laughing at that. That was really
That
caught
was
me off guard. I was like, "What?"
that was fantastic.
Ah, so good. Oh, that laugh was
Oh,
on par of his laugh. Holy shit. Devin, I want to ask, off topic a little bit, but how do you feel about Tim Blake Nelson actually learning how to play guitar for the role of Buster Scruggs? And he did his own singing.
I thought he did a great job at the singing, and it's funny that you mentioned that. I didn't realize that he, well, didn't know how to play. Like he didn't look like he was like a super professional player. I
No.
thought he did a decent job. I don't think what I heard was exactly what I saw. I feel like there was probably some resynced kind of playing,
Mm.
but it looks like he generally knows where to put his hands. Like it didn't stand out. Like
He did play it
I'm
in the
very
recording, apparently.
I'm very good at pointing out like inaccurate kind of guitar fingerings. Like you can tell if they're just putting their hand there versus actually playing any kind of chords. And it looked like he was actually playing them, though the take that I heard and the take that I saw weren't exactly the same, but he was generally putting his hand where it's supposed to be when chords came out.
Mm.
So I thought he did a great job with that. And funny thing with the guitar, I was gonna not bring this up just because it's such a nerdy thing, but that's a guitar from a company called Recording King, and
Huh.
that isn't a classic brand. It's more a contemporary brand, but that is a classic kind of a recreation of the type of guitar that they would have at that time. So it's interesting the way that they place that, and it's a brand that makes guitars that are pretty affordable. So that's really cool that they sort of created the style of guitar that you would see in the Old West.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you look at how acoustic guitars were made over the years, like the way they looked in Spain in the 1600s versus in the U.S. in the 1800s, and then U.S. or anywhere today, they definitely have very distinct differences in how the body was shaped. So they really wanted to be authentic looking for just this shot. But they grabbed a modern guitar that kind of recreates that. Anyway, I thought it was really good.
Nice. Guess it's time for final ratings. What would you guys give The Ballad of Buster Scruggs out of 10?
Solid 9. 9 out of 10, baby.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it a 9.6 to give it the inverse of a 6.9.
Buddy. The
Up there.
literally the only issue I had outside of the All Gold Canyon feeling just a little bit pointless to me is some of the CGI kind of looked like shit. That deer looked fucking awful. I don't know what they were thinking with that, but
There were some weird well, color grading edits that I've noticed as well that were a little that standed out a bit. I mean, I talked before about kind of light masking that you see in like DaVinci Resolve, and how super obvious that was when we saw Valhalla Rising last week.
mhm.
There was one instance like close to in the very last segment when this guy puts his hat on. Clearly, there's like a halo of light around the outline of his hat, just so
Oh,
you could more clearly see it. And I'm like, that wasn't necessary. Like it just stands out to me
I
when
love
it's one of those things once you see it you can't unsee it that they
that.
artificially change the light levels around his hat so that I don't know you see I don't get what the point of that was like he's putting a hat on and it's dark out. I can see the outline of it enough.
Yeah,
You know.
well, there's literally nothing else wrong with this film for me. It's the second best Coen Brothers movie behind Burton Fink, in my opinion, and I'm giving this
Wow.
one, yeah, you know what, 9.6 out of 10. It is
Wow.
fan
Wow.
fucking tastic.
I mean,
I love this
to
movie.
me, Big Lebowski's a 10. Uh,
Yeah, fair enough. A lot of people think so. And the segments ranked from best to worst for me are Meal Ticket, Ballad of Buster Scruggs, The Mortal Remains, The Gal Who Got Rattled, Near Algodone, and All Go Canyon. From top to bottom for me. So,
nice.
nice. Thank you so much, Tad, for joining us for another fantastic episode. You were a great guest. Thank you for keeping track of all the names of these movies. I'm
Yeah, no
surprised I remember
problem.
as many as I did.
Thank you for having me. No, it's always a pleasure to join you guys and, talk shop a little bit and, you know,
Yeah, we
bounce.
love having you on here, and correct me if I'm wrong. Are you planning to be on here again sometime soon?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
Uh,
Do you want to
well,
I
join
mean,
us next week?
we
if you
we
guys are ever talking about like an interesting film or something that like I would love to share my opinion on, then I would
well
more than happy.
we are more than
Uh,
happy to have you. And next week we have an interesting set of films. What do we have next week, Ian?
Edgar Wright, baby! We're talking Hot Fuzz, we're talking Baby Driver, and we're talking The Last Night in Soho. So Devin gets to finally watch
oh,
that movie.
Ooh, hell yeah.
oh shit!
Hails, yeah. Hopefully Stephen will be on board next week. Not sure right now. I'll make sure to confer with him. Tad, can we have you on next week?
What?
Yeah, maybe I might join in on that.
Oh,
Edgar Wright, I'm always down
I,
to talk about that
I think
guy.
it was Daryl's episode as well, wasn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Daryl. Would you
it
also
was
like
my
it?
episode. Yeah, I was planning on it.
I'm
You know,
sorry.
were you expecting Tad to hijack it? Or for us to invite him to
I mean,
hijack it?
I'll definitely be listening at the very least. That's Daryl's episode, so let him.
But
Right
yeah.
on.
No,
No,
anyways,
definitely looking forward to it.
yeah, me too, man. And is it Thursday, Saturday, Friday, or whenever the fuck yet? Have a night. Sorry, have a great night, guys. Stay tuned for Conan.